All right, we are going ahead and moving on with some concepts in Chapter 5. This is pre-calculus. You should be on Section 5.1, Analytical Trigonometry using Fundamental Identities. We are going to look at, if I give you certain information about an angle, something like the cosecant of the angle, if I give you the ratio and some other information, you're going to have to find the rest of the trig identities or the rest of the trig functions. So find the values of the other 5 trig functions if you're given cosecant of u is equal to negative 5/3 and cosine u is greater than 0. All right, when we do our trig functions, this is what I'm asking you to find. You know, what's the sine, the cosine, the tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent? Or you also want to know that your sine is equal to the y over r. Your cosine is equal to x over r. Your tangent is equal to y over x. And then, of course, the inverse, cosecant r over y. Secant is r over x. This is what you're trying to find. And cotangent would be x over y. So let's see what we have and what kind of information we're given. The main thing is that you got to figure out the quadrant that you're working in. The quadrant that I have in this case, cosecant, which is 1 over sine, is negative 5/3. So we know that sine's negative and cosine would be positive here. Well, that occurs in quadrant 4. So you can use that grid there to draw yourself a triangle in quadrant 4. And we can label. All we need to know is what's the x value, the y value, and then the r value. And then we can find the rest of the 5 identities. If cosecant is negative 5/3, then that tells me my hypotenuse, my r is 5. The y value is negative 3. You got to make sure that you put the negative with the correct value. And then x would have to be 4, and you can find that 4 from the Pythagorean theorem of x squared plus negative 3 squared equals 5 squared. All right, so x is 4, y is negative 3, and r is 5. They give us the cosecant, but we know that the sine is going to be, the sine of u is equal to negative 3/5. The cosine of u is equal to 4/5. Now I'm just doing those ratios. Tangent of u equals negative 3/4. We are already given the cosecant. Secant of u is 5/4, and cotangent of u is negative 4/3. All right, so you use your x, y, and r values to be able to write and identify the rest of the trig functions. All right, let's take a look at the next one. If secant of a negative angle is equal to negative 4, and the sine of the angle is the square root of 15 over 4, you are going to have to adjust your packet and make sure it's the square root of 15 and not the square root of, I think it was 28. Here's something that we know. If secant of a negative angle is equal to negative 4, we also know that secant of the positive angle is also negative 4. It doesn't change. There's an identity that says secant of negative x equals secant of positive x. It's because of the x value. The x value doesn't change where that angle is located. All right, so we know that sine is positive here, and secant or cosine would be negative. Okay, so that occurs in quadrant 2. Here's what we know. In quadrant 2, we've got our sine. Well, sine is the x value, or the y value, the root 15, over the r value, which is 4. And if secant here is negative 4, then that would make the x value negative 1. You can, again, use the Pythagorean theorem or just give with your ratios here. See, this would be a negative 4 over 1. So the negative goes with the 1 because it's the x. The r is always positive. So now we can do our sine, which we already are given. You might want to list them. X equals -1, y equals the root 15, and r equals 4. So let's start with cosine. Cosine of my angle of x is equal to -1/4. I've got my tangent of x is equal to the square root of 15 over a -1, which is -√15. Okay, I'm going to have my cosecant of x would equal, you'd have -1, you would have -1 over for your cosecant, you would have 4 over the root 15, but you would want to rationalize that. Rationalizing it would give us 4 square roots of 15 over 15. All right, my secant was given to me, secant, and so cotangent. Cotangent of x, we would have -1 over the root of 15, like this. But we want to rationalize that, multiply top and bottom by the root 15, so negative square root of 15 over 15. So those are your final answers. You had to find the other 4 ratios in that problem. All right, one more problem left, and the main thing is so that you're finding the right quadrant. Secant of x is undefined, and sine is less than 0, so sine's negative. In order for secant x to be undefined, secant of some angle is, secant is found by having your r value divided by your x value. So that means whatever our r is, we don't know, but we're dividing by 0. So when do you divide by 0? You divide by 0 when x is 0, and x is 0 here on the y-axis. So if we're using the unit circle, we're either at pi over 2 or 3/2 pi, one of those two. And since sine is negative, that's where your y's are negative. Here, your y's are negative. So it has to be the ordered pair at 0, -1. So we have this angle going all the way around to 3/2 pi. Okay? That is where secant is undefined and sine's negative. So my x is equal to 0, my y is equal to -1, and my r would also be equal to -1 because it would be the radius of that circle. So I can list my identities now. My sine of the angle is -1. My cosine of the angle, your cosine would be the 0. We're given the secant, let's see, tangent of the angle is undefined because you are taking -1 divided by 0. Cosecant of the angle would also be -1. Secant is undefined. And cotangent of the angle would be equal to 0. And that is it. So you got to find the right location. All right, your assignment for this first section here is page 345. You'll get plenty of practice with this concept, 1 through 25 odd.